Recording in progress.
All right, we'll just give it a couple more seconds for folks to keep coming in.
Recording in progress.
Yes. Yeah. I just sent it to you. I'll send it to Brian as well. Okay.
Recording.
Okay, and I saw that Elisa entered the room, I believe. Elisa, I wasn't sure if you were done with your comment or not. Would you like to continue to speak?
No, I think I said everything I intended to at that time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any other folks from the community, any other parents or teachers?
I have another question. Lonnie. The attorney that was just on, I forgot her name, mentioned that the school is the one that pulled out of the contract with the city. Is that what I understood her to say?
Her name was Elisa, and I will pass that over to her.
Elisa, yes, Elisa. Is that what you were saying? You're representing the cities that the city didn't pull out of the contract. The school pulled out of the contract, is what you said?
Scott, I will send you in the chat my office number and we can talk about that. Not in the public meeting meant to address the policy, and I will pull that record.
Offline? Okay, I see. We don't want that on record. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Other voices?
I guess I would like to know I guess I'd like to know if the school district's use of force policy, as it is written now, does it follow the general guidelines, and does it, I mean, is it law abiding? Can it be enforced? Is it, I don't know what the terms would be, but is it basically like, does it protect the school district from legal action from outside groups, etc.? Is it I don't know, is it legal, I guess?
Thank you for that question. I don't have the full answer to that because I think, yeah, I'm not entirely sure what the exact answer would be. They have the policy in place. So I think that that's something that either raises the red flag or says that it went through in some way or another. But thank you for that question, Adriana.
The policy may very well be legal. I haven't delved into it enough to state that one way or another, but my assumption is that it is based on what I've seen. But legality in and of itself does not necessarily protect a school district from legal action. It doesn't mean that they're going to be sued or that the lawsuit will win, but it's certainly not going to stop that from coming down the pipe. And the better question would be, what is the recourse when the school district does not adhere to its own policy? So say there are steps that are missed along the way to getting to escalating to the use of those guns. If there are steps missed along the way, then there very well could be legal action. And that's why it's very important that all these steps are outlined very clearly and that the district is at least adhering to that. But to me, the discussion really isn't about whether this policy will get them sued or not, but whether it's a smart policy to have in the first place. And I would love at some point to hear how it is that the school district and the school board arrived at a policy where they thought guns on campus were a necessary thing and what data and statistics they have to back that up. Because most of the data and statistics show that armed security on campus does not actually prevent mass shootings. And in fact, it just creates a further tense environment that exacerbates situations and harms, brown and Black children.
Thank you so much for answering the question to the best of your abilities, Kendrick. And also thank you for those points. They're questions that I think we all have, and we're definitely going to make some time for folks to pose questions if that is a thing that folks want to ask. And I see that there's also a comment in the chat. Andrea, I'm not entirely sure who made that comment or that comment made or was coming from. Based on my research, they're allowed to have concealed weapons, and so the weapons are allowed to be not shown. Also, Chris, I see that you have muted yourself, or Christopher, sorry.
Yeah, so when we talk about personnel being trained to use a weapon, in a training situation, gun range is one thing, but to be in a combat situation is totally different. People will react and not use some of the training that they learn. If we look at this news article that I posted, it's a gun trained teacher accidentally shoots gun in California high school. The gun wasn't there in the first place. They wouldn't have accidentally shot anything. Now, when Elisa, you mentioned that having rifles in the school, that's different from a handgun. Rifle is generally considered a high-powered weapon. If we look at the things that you were presenting earlier, not only they specified using a .223 round or a .556 round, which is the same round as an AR-15. AR-15 is an extremely deadly weapon that they're trying to ban in some states.
I believe Kendrick asked a question. Christopher, thank you for that information. I believe Kendrick asked a question about data supporting the policy. Is there anyone on the call that can answer that question?
So this policy actually predates my leadership in the district, and it was developed on the hills of Sandy Hook. And so we're not the only district in our region. There are a couple other schools that have decided to equip officers. I don't think that we're probably the only school in the country, with the policy that has decided to equip officers as well. But Prosser School District was one of those districts that decided at that time that having an armed security officer would be beneficial or preventative, I guess. Toppenish School District is another district in our region. Also serves a high minority population with Hispanic students as well as Native American students. Kiona-Benton School District is also within our region. The difference between ours and theirs is the fact that we've chosen to hire ex-law enforcement. And in communication with our insurance company, law enforcement was kind of the gold standard. If you could hire somebody who'd been in the law enforcement profession, that was what the preference was. These other schools have decided to equip teachers, administrators, civilians, basically. So that's what differentiates Prosser from the other districts in that respect. But if you're looking for like quantitative data, I don't think at that time I could communicate with Dr. Tolkacher, but at that time there wasn't any real quantitative data that they put to it. A lot of schools and districts took safety precautions as a result of that incident.
We also have a question in the chat from Maricela. I would like to see data to support the school district's position in the absence of data. Are they reacting based on feelings only? And then also the question of what was gold standard based on, or like what was the outcomes of that? Based on what?
Sorry, so data, there's plenty of data. You can talk to our security officers, some of them are here. There's empirical data, there's anecdotal data. I think that there are some community members who I've spoken with who have said, good for you. That's a step in the right direction. As far as like gold standard, the idea that you have somebody who, a lot of our officers have engaged in different types of training, whether that's de-escalation, that's a typical Friday night for some of our officers that they have to deal with hostile people. And so they have had some of that training. They do have a background. They are comfortable with firearms. So, and on top of that, the district has worked through, I did work through in the past, a company named Force Dynamics. The guy's name was John Ladinas, who helped certify our officers, and they had to go through training and target practice and things like this on a pretty regular basis. Glenn, did I miss anything? Or if Scott Hudson's on here?
Hi, everybody. I'm Glenn Thompson. I'm the security director for the district. I am also a certified law enforcement firearms instructor. I've been a firearms instructor since 1989. And I'm not just a shoot at the paper instructor. I am a combat firearms instructor. I train all of my students to be combat firearm or combat firearm ready. Each one of the officers that works for the district has extensive, realistic, real world training with firearms and when to use them, when not to use them, and how to be safe.
May?
Hi, everyone. Thank you. I hope you can hear me. I don't have my earphones. Superintendent Matt Ellis. Since the Prosser School District has the majority of students are students of color and the majority of the board of directors for the school board are white, would you be actually committed to working with community to make sure that more Latinx and people of color are actually going to be represented at the school board? And if that's not your lane, where can we go to make sure that we help to make that happen? Because this is the issue that's happening, is that there's white people that's making decisions that are impacting people of color and students. And y'all think that's okay. It's not okay. It seems like what I'm hearing, I feel like y'all are preparing for Thanos to come to Earth. This is not the Avengers. You gotta give some real statistics and data on like when stuff really went down. Is there an active shooter situation that happens? Like how many times has that happened in the past week, month, year? Because this is just crazy. I'd be so like, I would not let my niece or my nephew go to school if there was like people that was just be carrying guns around and like that. And it just doesn't look right. If you really look at like stuff that, you know, if you're a philosopher, read Foucault, right? He talks about power, and that's how our society is actually built on, is this philosophy of panopticism and this whole like other stuff. Sorry, I might be talking too much because I got a lot of seeds I'm eating, but I do want to make sure that, you know, maybe the commitment is to work to support more people of color to be representing the people who are the majority of the district. Thank you.
Certainly, I can speak to that. And so before we broke for COVID, we had translators at our meetings with earpiece devices in order to aid in participation. I would say that I would encourage you to touch base with our board members individually and judge them by their hearts and actions versus maybe about one single policy. This was a board who really fought to keep kids fed, to get kids the resources they needed, and will continue to fight on behalf of kids, simply because their stance is to equip an officer, and maybe we don't believe in guns. Shouldn't allow a person or a group of person to stand from the outside and criticize where their heart is in terms of educational outcomes for students and the services they provide.
I object.
As
I'm
was
not
mentioned
standing
before,
to actually, I'm
Can I
not
finish?
judging them by their feelings. Like, I think you just said
Like,
that I was
can I
judging them
finish?
or by their hearts or whatever.
Yep.
I'm not doing that. Okay. I'm just telling you right now that I'm talking about representation. I'm not even talking about their hearts and feelings. We need representation. Thank you. You can continue now.
Yeah, so thank you for permitting or, you know, giving me authority to speak again. So yeah, the board has done that. Like I said, we're not the only district in our area or region who has a policy like that. That's been a product of a number of different years. You know, I know that access is a big conversation. We're fully on board with that. And so I know that one of our board members, Jesselyn Cole, is a fluent Spanish speaker and reaches out to our Hispanic population, you know, different voters and different community constituents, and is able to converse with them in a native language or a language they feel comfortable in. And so, yeah, totally, we're totally willing to do
Is that
that.
one person that speaks Spanish that you know of? Because I've heard this in different variations, like you have a Black friend.
Yeah, so that was an example, right? I mean, we could, I guess what I understood Sharon, kind of her framing of this was to talk about solutions, not necessarily, you know, to go out on a witch hunt basically against Prosser, right? When there are a number of districts,
It's not a
Tybee
witch
and
hunt. We're looking
Toppenish,
for
like I
solutions, but you're not giving us statistics. Thank you, Matt.
Can I
Okay,
very quickly say
sorry.
something? So I want to preface this that not only am I a student that has gone to Prosser High School, I also have a social work degree and a mental health degree. And I want to name that in this space, we're not allowed to name others' emotions. Matt, if you are feeling criticized, if you are feeling that we are attacking the Prosser School District, I invite you in to question those emotions and to question why you're feeling that way. Samaith was just sharing his own feelings and was just openly saying that if he did have children, he would not want them to be in that space. So we do not get
Sure.
to name, especially as white folks, we don't get to name the emotions of BIPOC folks.
Okay,
Samaith is
yeah.
being kind enough, 1 second. Just like you said, thank you for letting me have the opportunity to talk. I am not done. Samaith was kind enough to share his emotions with you. And the responsible thing and the correct thing is to say, thank you for those emotions. I hear them and I hear your concern. And then you can share your own emotions, but naming someone else's is not what this space is for today. Thank you very much.
Okay, so yeah, I'm willing to listen. I'm put in the position as a superintendent that my job is to implement policy. So regardless of if I agree or disagree with something, my job is to you know, basically work with the board on implementing those policies, and I think we've done so effectively. I would invite, you know, if you want to move to Prosper and be a part of the community conversation, I would invite you to move to the Lower Valley. It's an excellent place. We have a lot of great things going on here. So
Any other community? Oh, interrupted someone, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
My name is I'm a state representative, and I'm trying to find a solution also, and it's not to criticize the Prosper School District, but more an issue of, have you provided, like you provided training to the officers, an anti-racist education training to any of your officers, your law enforcement, the board, because I think this will also help a lot. And, you know, I just wanted to be able to offer that also.
Yeah, certainly. That's
Something to look
a
into.
conversation we're working through right now. And so we've committed to doing the training that ESD piloted around race in schools and how those two things meet. And so to assist our teachers, I feel like I have a broken connection here. So yeah, we've already started to engage in that type of training.
Good, thank you.
Noelani, I had a question that I put in the chat, but I'd like to revisit here, especially since there are so many people that I don't know, and I'm assuming that they might have a background that could help. I'm wondering, in what ways can the school district create de-escalation and positive ways to interact with students so that the use of force is not needed? And I know that Mr. Scotty Hunt had mentioned that we keep jumping to the guns, but I have read the use of force and there is no continuum on it. And so that the only way to read that is to think that that is, you jump to the weapons for the use of force. And that I'm just wondering if there are any people on this Zoom call that have expertise so that we can create a more thorough policy.
We do PBIS. We do Character Strong. We do have counselors on staff. And even we partnered with community and schools to get some mental health type of drug counselors. We're one of the few that has those resources and who've created those partnerships. So we do have some of those, like Mr. Hunt had mentioned. This is in the most extreme cases and is written in such a way that if an incident were to occur, that the district would have that as a policy.
And I do know that, and I think that's great. I think that having PBIS is great, but there, for example, there's a use of force policy, it's written down, but I don't see any written down policies for PBIS. I don't see any de-escalation policies. And I still don't see the continuum, the use of force continuum, which I was easily able to Google online after that school board meeting. It's quite easy to get. And I just feel like the school district has been spending it just seems that there's been a lot of effort in discussing what kinds of weapons can be used for the school, but I don't see that kind of effort in creating a policy for de-escalation, or even having to create positive relationships with students, whether it's morning meetings or the Mustang hour that the high school uses. I just think that if there's going to be a use of force policy, that there should probably be policies that are in positive nature, so that the district can point to those and say, we not only have a use of force policy for students, but we also have this, and this that help students and staff before we ever need to use force.
Thank you so much, Adriana. And I will transition now to exactly what Adriana brought up, just this conversation of what are some of the things that everyone is holding space for that we could do next? What are some ideas that people are having, maybe more questions for how this can go forward? Again, part of this was not just to have a space for voices to be heard, but also to create a space where we could plan and start talking about what can be done for our students and what can be done specifically for the Latinx students whose parents go to work at 5 a.m, get home at 6 p.m. to cook dinner, to go to bed at 8 o'clock, and don't have time to show up to these meetings sometimes. The parents that genuinely want to know what this is, but parents like mine who a school board doesn't mean anything to them. My parents didn't know what a school board was or what they did until it had to be a thing, or until one of my siblings was like, hey, I want to do stuff with the school board. Then my parents are like, what is a school board? So maybe some of the next steps that we can start talking about, along with what Adriana was sharing, is informing Latinx folks. What is the school board? What do we do? And how are decisions actually made? And with that, I will open up to everyone else. Thank you. Andrea Cadillac.
Thank you, Noelani. I am curious about students with disabilities, especially students who have mental health or emotional behavioral disabilities to qualify under IDEA. There is a very specific restraint and seclusion protocol to be followed when these students experience imminent harm. And often, if there is an instance of imminent harm, it invites the school district to look to see if a student needs special education support. So I'm wondering how you train staff and security resource officers and people in the school to distinguish on the fly between imminent harm that requires de-escalation on basis of disability and use of force.
Yeah, so we have our own in-house CPI trainer who deals specifically with restraint with kids maybe with behavioral disabilities. We've also offered GAP training, which was referred to, and all teachers were offered that. And that really is in terms of, they call it, the strategy is fortify and defend. And so if there is an attack or if there is a lockdown, our teachers are trained to barricade the doors, have T-ball bats within their classroom to try and defend their students in order to save lives. And so all our district, our teachers went through that. And so the idea is that those conversations are really focused on if there is an attacker on campus, or if somebody, if there is, God forbid, a school shooting, what would be the strategy for you as a classroom teacher? Like I said, we were one of the districts that didn't take that step and say we want to arm teachers. Other districts in our region have, but we felt like fortifying and defending in the curriculum that the GAP force dynamics in their GAP training was a good one. So yeah, we do have both around restraining students who have behavioral needs and have an in-house trainer on that, as well as looking at the other end of the extreme. If there was something to occur, are we prepared for that?
Carrie Basas.
Great, thank you. This is Carrie, she, her pronouns. I'm the director of the Governor's Office of the Education Ombuds. Your point about having parents and community advocates and others in students' lives more informed about how school boards work is really important. And it's a question that's come up in other settings. And from the beginning discussion of it in other settings, what is apparent is there's a little bit of information that lives on our side of the Office of the Education Ombuds. There's some nonprofits with information. There's certainly informal community wisdom. And then there's some information at OSPI. I think it's really hard. I appreciate WASDA's offer. I think it's really hard as a parent to even know, as you said, that there's a school board, and let alone that there's an association of school directors and what a school director is. So it seems like an opportunity that's not specific necessarily to this issue as much, that agencies can come together, both government and nonprofit, to think about what would be useful and to have that information accessible on school board websites too, so that people don't have to dig for it. And there are really ample opportunities and accessibility for families and other concerned community members, even teachers, thinking about their access to school boards to connect with their concerns and also share what's working for them. So I think that's a valuable project as well that keeps coming up, but action around it is something that we really all need to coordinate. And I'm happy to offer that on behalf of us. And so happy to connect with others who want to do that work.
Carrie, the issue though is in order for us to do that work, we also need to get funded for it, right? Number one.
Yeah.
The other two is that the other also has to do with the fact that we also need it to be translated in the different languages that people said they can have access. And finally, I think that there's a certain point where we as community groups or nonprofits can interact, but it should not fall on us to be able to, you know, to do work. So
Yeah.
it's because it's a history that plays over and over again. We raise the issue as people of color, and then you say, hey, you might want to work with this group. There's no funding. And then the issue then becomes our issue and not the society's issue.
And I agree with you on all of that. I think the burden is on state government agencies and school boards to do that work. And then if community advocates, families and students are involved, there has to be a way to compensate them for their time. I don't want to put that on you. And we're really underfunded as an agency, but this is a part of our charge, right? And part of the charge of WASDA and OSPI and others to make education more accessible. So we can suck it up and do that work. We should do it together. Some of us are a little bit more wealthy in this area than others, but there are ways to make this happen. And I don't want that burden to be on you. So I absolutely agree, Vilma. It's our work, not yours. If you want to participate, that's great, but there have to be ways to offset that labor too. So thank you.
Very, very briefly, because it's not necessarily the reason why we're here today, but very briefly, WASDA has an initiative for the last 18 months. We've been working with our current board members of color around the state to identify best practice for attracting and retaining board members of color and supporting our board members of color so that we can reach a place where the elected officials making decisions for kids accurately reflect and represent the students they're making decisions for. So I have a steering committee of 12 board members of color from around the state, east, west, large, small, urban, rural, and we're building out a framework that is ways within WASDA to increase opportunities for input, voice, and decision-making and leadership roles within our state organization as a way of creating a space where our community members of color who might not feel that they have a space on their local school board can feel that they have a space within the state association to support them. So if anybody offline would like to talk about those efforts or opportunities, yes, we're in the field. We go to church meetings. We do what we can so that we can help communicate with all communities in Washington, what it means to be a school board member, how to access your school board, how to have your voice heard. We also have several trainings in place and underway for our current school board members on how to hear that voice and how to go where people are. And I don't want to monopolize this time, but I will make myself available to anybody in this group that would like to hear more or partner or be part of those efforts. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Anyone else want to share some ideas for next steps or some asks that they're maybe having? Go ahead, Brian Bailey.
Hey, apologize. I couldn't find my raise my hand button. You would think I'd be technologically advanced at this point, but I forget all these things. So I'm the principal at Prosser High School, and I just wanted to have an open, invite to any of you guys who want to come and tour the new high school. We have been doing tours recently. On our district webpage, we have an opportunity for anybody who wants to sign up for those tours to come into the building, and I can lead you through the building and show you what it looks like. As part of this, I've tried to sit and be quiet and listen to a number of things, but I do really believe that our district and our high school is trying to take a proactive approach to this. And we do want to work with community members in trying to to find solutions for all of this. Couple of things that I've heard today. I think that the continuum conversation, it is available in not the policy, but in the procedure. So if you look at the procedure, you'll find that language there. Matt Ellis mentioned the CPI crisis prevention intervention or crisis prevention intervention CPI training that we do in our district, and that is available to everybody. So there are other methods and other steps before the use of force, on that continuum that we are being trained in and we are employing. But like I said, we are always looking for ways to improve this. I also would like to see more of our community members. I know there are a lot of people on this meeting who are not directly from our community. So those of you who are directly, or whether you are or aren't, again, I encourage you guys come down here. I'm more than willing to have a separate tour if you want a separate tour with all of us. But those tours are open to the public, and you can come take a look at our building and see where we're at. One more question and comment that I had was, there was a comment about being on a tour and seeing an intimidation factor for a gun safe. Well, we're currently in the co-occupancy phase of our new building. So I just will say this, the fact that we don't have student chairs doesn't mean that we're going to make all students stand. Our student chairs haven't shown up because we haven't completely moved in yet. And so as part of the move-in process, we're working through that, and that gun safe will not be out in the open. It just we haven't had the opportunity to put it in its place yet. So that will be resolved. Given this meeting, maybe that's something we need to resolve today rather than tomorrow, just so that that's not an intimidation factor. So I just want to, I'm grateful for the meeting. I'm grateful for the invite, and yes, we are trying to be proactive as we go through this process. So if you'd like to be a further part of it locally, then feel free to reach out to me and sign up for those tours, or come and visit at the high school and we can talk more. Thank you.
Thank you. Rose Biddo. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing y'all's name. I also have lots of things.
Brian, I'm sorry, Rose. Brian, can you drop your work email? I know folks on my team have already started asking when I'm going to get a bus for all of us to come over to Prosser. So I think that's going to be happening.
Thank you. Yes. And I want to just echo and add our director, Carrie, talking about being ready to help in the work of connecting with families in the times and spaces where they are available. And I've put a couple things in chat about where there is already access to some relevant data. And I know that there's more, and that I just really am hopeful that as the Prosser community continues these dialogues, that there will be opportunity to share out the relevant data with community members to really have an informed, engaged dialogue, which is a great model for any district, as every district now is going to be required to engage their full school community in reviewing policies and decisions around how you approach school safety. So this is a great place to be identifying some of those data points and information that you can share out. The one I don't have a link for, but I think would be just an essential and valuable piece of it, would be if you have a student climate survey or a parent family survey that you can add in on that. And if there hasn't been one done, that maybe if you have a chance to do one of those and include that information as you engage the full community in conversation about this. I just wanted to highlight that it sounds like there's a desire for data. There's all kinds of data points that might be relevant. There's some that are publicly available, and more that we'd have to look to the district to pull out and share with the community.
Thank you, Rose. I see Melissa Bowen has a question in the chat. It says a few people have mentioned the de-escalation policy. Is that written down somewhere? Can it be shared? I've also heard requests for how officers are trained in anti-racism and implicit bias. What trainings is the district providing, and are they vetted by the community? Not sure if there's anyone here that can answer that.
No, I don't know that we have a de-escalation policy. That's definitely something we've talked about, is Mr. Hunt said, a continuum of strategies, de-escalation being one. As far as implicit bias, microaggressions, racism, things like that, the state has provided funding for that type of training for teachers. We're looking into different trainings that would be valuable for a staff in general, knowing that there are also people within the Public School Employees Union, our administrators, lots of other people that would benefit. So yeah, we're, love PD, even if the state funds, even more so when the state funds it. So yeah.
I can add into that as well. All of the team members from the security team are going to be attending the mandatory training that's put on by OSPI, that's required by House Bill 1214. That includes training in racism and de-escalation and all that stuff. That training will be next week.
Thank you. And we have another question in the chat from Adriana Miller. Who can the district partner with to create de-escalation policies?
That was a conversation that I had yesterday with Sharon about we're willing to partner with whomever. If you have resources, definitely. We love grants, we love money, we love trainings, we love any way that we can develop, we're open to consider. So if you have money available or you want to partner with us, please reach out to me, matt.ellis@prosperschools.org.
So the EAC has some trainings that we can offer to both security officers and resource officers, SROs, and law enforcement. We can also, Superintendent Ellis, I will share with you and anyone else on this call some of the other trainings that we do. Plus, if you see my picture, we're having a conference that will be virtual this year that will allow for folks to really dive into implicit bias, racism, and how that shows itself up on a daily basis in education circles. Other than that, I'm happy to share any other information. We have worked with some other school districts on de-escalation policies, and I'm happy to share that with you.
Thank you so much. With that, we're in our last 10 minutes. Can I get the capacity to share my screen very quickly? We're just gonna go over some of the next steps that we've heard that I typed out on the slide and some next steps that we came up for this meeting. And then ask the Prosser School board members who are here what can actually be done, and then possibly look at another meeting date for all of us to come together and see what next steps are being done and continue this conversation. Give me 1 second. So some of the stuff that we've heard being asked within this space are for de-escalation policies to be created and shared with the community. We heard from Matt right now saying that he's going to be working with EEC, and that was very amazing. So thank you for that. We also have heard a lot of requests for the data on why specifically Prosser Washington feels the need to have guns. We heard a lot about why surrounding towns are doing it. We heard a lot about gold standards and stuff, but we didn't hear anything specifically about why arming officers within our school is what is needed. We also are asking for the school board members to reach out to community members who may not be present due to language barriers or to work, finding ways of getting that voice heard, whether that's attending the church and asking for folks to leave comments in a basket and bringing those comments to the school board and sharing those, whatever it is, but trying to find ways where you are meeting the parents where they are and not trying to have them figure out what they don't know, because many of them don't know this and they don't know that they don't know this. And so providing them these spaces where they already are and they can be educated is very important. I think the next step, which we wanted to do a lot today, and I hope we were able to do, is allow for listening sessions where community members get to voice their concerns. In the research that I did and then the community members I was able to meet with, many of them shared that it feels like a very one-sided conversation during school board meetings where you get to share one thing and then the school board, it's kind of like an automated robot response. They push a button, say something, and then that's the end of that conversation. And it doesn't feel like emotions are heard. It doesn't feel like things are being processed and thought through and talked about. It just feels like check marks are being made and we're moving on very quickly. There's also the ask for creating, I think it goes in line with the data, getting more data on why this is being used, the instances of where it's being used, and then also like what supports this being in place for our students in this district. And then actually, and it looks like the whole meeting actually covered the stuff. The very last piece that we have that we wanted to bring to all of you, which we already talked about a little bit with the bias training, is also enacting and is doing an anti-racist training for all of the school proctor district and the school board members. We think that that would be a great thing. With that, I will stop sharing my screen. We have 3 minutes. If there was anything that I missed, please place that in the chat. And now I invite for the Prosser School District board members to please share their thoughts.
I think Jesselyn Cole's on here. She's one of our current board members. But there was a question in the chat box: why wasn't de-escalation prioritized? This policy has been a work product going back through multiple boards and multiple leaders. So it's important that, I know there was some, like the identification that the all-white board did this, but this actually has been in place before a lot of the current board members even took office. So just an important little tidbit there.
Thank you. And you mentioned, oh, there we go. Jesselyn, cool, thank you.
Hi. So I just wanted to jump on and say that, yes, I've been here listening and appreciate the thoughts. And I mean, there's always more work to do and things to look into. So I appreciate you typing that up, the list, and kind of putting everything together that came out of this call and next steps that we can look into and move forward with. So thank you for that.
With that, I will ask the school board if they are willing to attend another meeting where we can talk about what next steps can be done with the steps we created, as well as continuing this planning of how we can incorporate Latinx community members and other BIPOC community members within Prosser.
If you're looking for the entire board, we'll have to plan it out so we can post it as a special board meeting around this topic. I'll definitely bring it to their attention, as well as I think if you're looking for a community-wide conversation, that might be better. It might happen better in Prosser. And I know that we have some Prosser people on here, but people who live in this community with different, I guess, yeah, who live in this community and are a part of this community, to really get a accurate picture of some of those thoughts, feelings, and ideas.
Yeah. I would really appreciate if you would take it to the board, and then I would love to be in communication with you on how we can do a space that's accessible to everyone. So maybe we can do a Zoom call that has translation, that has ways of people being able to access and being able to actually communicate freely, possibly also talking about better camera setups and better voice setups for the current school board meetings right now, because it's very difficult to see who is talking and what is being said. So things like that, I would love to be in communication with you about and see if we can bring that all together to have both community voice and the school board members present.
Yeah, or even, I mean, I don't know, you graduate from here, I'd welcome you back and be part of the community, and, we'll set up a meeting
Yeah,
Just
I'm in the
totally-
community all the time. My family's still there, still have lots of
Yes.
siblings that go to the school. All of my aunts and uncles still live there. Prosser is the Latinx home for many of my family members.
Yeah.
So I know Prosser, it is my home and I appreciate it.
Come home. Yeah.
So with that, we will wait to hear back from Matt about what the school board says. And once we do, we will send out an invitation. And keeping in mind, I think it was Scotty that shared this, that this time isn't an appropriate time for everyone. Correct me if I was wrong, if that wasn't you, but someone had shared that this time isn't the best time. So maybe we'll try to keep in mind the time that is a little bit more inclusive of folks and of the times that especially farm worker folks are working. So with that, if there's any other comments, please drop them in the chat. I see that Marisela and Adriana both dropped 2 comments in the chat. The first is the school board has always been 100% white. Please correct me if I'm wrong. And Adriana said, I don't understand how the use of force policy has been around for years and years, but it is still referred to as being in the process of creation. With that,
Peter Tran, if you go back, Peter Tran was Vietnamese. I remember he was part of the school board. This is when I was growing up. So I'd have to look into the history, but he comes to mind as a board member who is a part of the district and district leadership. So.
yes, and as Sharon said, if you have any questions, if you want to connect with me, please do. I'm always open to that. We have our chats or our emails in the chat. And with that, thank you everyone for coming. Thank you so much for opening this space. Thank you to the school board members for listening and creating a space for people to share and for planning what next steps can be done to help our students and help them be seen and have their needs be met. How did we do?
How do you think you did?
I was terrified. I haven't had this much anxiety since I was yelling at white people at